Good morning, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from Hawaii. November 11th, 2021. This is part 8 in this series, The Dharma Life, Lessons Learned, Lessons Learning, along this high adventure of awakening. I hope you're well, wherever you may be. The topic today. As it's been said by many throughout the ages, everybody is losing someone. Inbuilt into the system of life is the obvious reality of discontinuity, of death, of the disillusionment of being, of returning to dust, to the elements, to the atoms, to the neutrinos, to whatever the biological, spiritual interface is of the God molecule, of being, whatever the word is that we want to use to describe that. And reflecting upon that stark reality, that intimate, stark reality. There is clearly a cultural, if not existential conditioning to believe the fear of discontinuity, the fear of death. And it brings up the issue of, for me, of unexamined or examining with some degree of clarity the issue of grasping and attachment. And the bonds of intimacy and connectivity that seem to dissolve, if not separate, with this reality, whatever it is, called death. Everybody is losing someone. There's a famous discourse attributed to the Buddha of Kisa Gotami, a woman who had lost her son, and an elder said, "Please seek the advice of the young man Buddha." And she sought his understanding about death and separation of her beloved child. It's very difficult to put oneself in the mind and body of Kisa Gotami, but it's said that the Buddha said everybody is losing someone. And he further said, according to this sutta, please go home to home throughout the town and the village and seek your own personal experience of life and death and mortality, and ask the household, do you know anyone who has not lost someone? And if you find someone who says no, ask for a white mustard seed and bring the evidence back to me of that encounter. And we will go further into the dialogue of the existential dimension of birth and aging and illness and loss and separation and death. All these are deeply embedded, I want to use the word cultural cognitive, existential, pre-existential, inbuilt into the quantum physics, if you will, the super field string experiential theory of inner being and outer being and the dimensionality of everything? What is the proclivity to feel fear or sadness when there is discontinuity? Why? Why does that have to happen? And there are those rare women and men throughout history who've brought a dialogue to the edge of that cultural, existential. You almost want to naturalize it as a human response, a life response. But one wonders, upon deeper, intimate exploration, because all of us have known someone like Kisa Gotami, who has lost her son. Everybody is losing someone. Everybody. 250,000 people die today. Untold millions of animals purposely slaughtered for consumption. Then millions upon millions of other birds and insects and fish. And I look at the flowers and the bushes and the trees and the leaves all around me here in this sacred area. And what is the spirit that animates the flower, the fragrance? Yes, there's the bird, there is the gecko, but everything teeming with the vibrational pulse of being and living. Everybody is losing someone. And that edge between intimate, cultural, existential, acceptable reality and a deeper, more numanistic, fabric, core, soul, heart level of truth investigation. I find that fascinating. And so I'm asking myself the question today. Not just today, but if everybody is losing someone, that includes me and you, and if we're not waiting for our turn, so to speak, which obviously, not so obviously, sort of obviously, but sort of very well disguised, could happen, will happen, is programmed to happen at the subatomic particle level of being, the human level, death. Any second. So wild to think that this parade, this charade, this theater, this movie, this dance, this existence, this animation, just like that, inbuilt into the physics of shared space, is anicca, anatta, emptiness of self-control, control of the particles of being. None of us can pull the string and say, let the theater play according to my script. We have some semblance of control, but very little. And so this existential dilemma / crises of consciousness, to come more and more intimately to the terms of truth rather than the fable of cultural, education, religious, I wanted to use the word education, but addictions that normalize, even elevate the pornography of suffering, the glorification of war and violence, the dark side of God, the evil, the satanic, the Mara-driven, the bloodlust dance of voodoo, whatever. But one of the great things that I attribute to the teachings of the Buddha, he didn't normalize dukkha or suffering. He basically said that it can be not only worked with, but you may even want to devote your existence to both the challenge of the embeddedness of different dimensions of suffering and conflict. And you may even want to dedicate your existence to the transmutation of the confluence of negativity and suffering and conflict and difficulty and anxiety and stress, all those markers, those textures, those sonic vibratory fields called states of consciousness. You may want to dedicate yourself to the transmutation, the transformation of those into the victory of light, of beauty, of goodness, of truth, of the sacred. And to humanize the edge, as much as humanly possible, at the same time warrior-like. Put on your finest armor, trans armor, if you will, going to battle, raw war, the quest for world peace and the end of violence that's embedded in the cellular, I would call it the DNA of being. If there's a raison d'etre at the God molecule level for me that I want to listen to and respond to and be nurtured by, it's the warrior in me that wants to conquer evil. And at the same time, creatively elevate the beauty of not just my own existence, but this shared tapestry of physical and cognitive and spiritual properties called the suburb of our solar system, our galaxy. And do what I can to play in that creative field of linguistic etymology and physics and spirituality and the molecules of the psychedelic and the nutrients of food and air and the ability to pranayama totality in the most humble way. Not just breathe, but breathe the goodness of your own innate purity and keep transmuting the edge and turn back. Yeah, everybody's losing someone. As you are, as I am. And we're even losing our own sense of identity and being. We're losing our mobility, our cognitive functions, inbuilt into the physics of birth. Crazy to think that innately physics informs us, as it's been said, that innately built into the physics of totality is death, the physics of earth. The sun, our mother sun, will engulf the child planet Earth. And the great astrophysical silence, our legacies, everybody's losing someone. Galaxies, black holes, white holes, parallel universes, everything in totality, isn't that wild? Must face the crucifixion, must face discontinuity and death. Everything in this universe will die. Everybody's losing someone. And Kisa Gotami, house to house, have you lost someone? Yes, ma'am, we have. Multiple people. Goes to the next home. Have you lost someone in this household? Yes. We know many people who've lost someone. Indeed, as we understand it, Kisa, everybody is losing someone. To feel that, and I want to use the word for me without fear, or if there is fear, to transmute the fear into the fragrance of freedom, that it's a perfume. The insight into transitoriness and anicca and anatta and dukkha are fragrant insights, that they nurture the soil of presence. They create courage, adventure, wisdom, insight, determination, patience, all the virtues of the the adventure on the topography of shared space here, inside, outside, everywhere on Earth, in our solar system, in the dimensions that we share psychedelically, meditatively, through telescopes, lenses of mindfulness and awareness, we see and feel. And how to keep illuminating that confluence in our lives with courage and beauty. So, the second half of the talk, I've been reflecting on, if you're not waiting, or if you're not living in the convenience of ordinary toxic bonding to cultural propaganda and spiritual propaganda and misinformation and distortions of up and down, low and below, and hierarchy and xenophobia and slavery and all the various things that come with separation and duality and an unrecognized fusion with greed, anger, and delusion, and the 10,000 nuances of those three words. Wow. What keeps you keeping on? What are you living for? And I write to myself, really, really way down deep inside. And I know it sounds like a kind of a pseudo TED talk to want to extol the virtues of passion and adventure and creativity and all the things on the stage of the Western capitalistic Tony Robbins-like, thank you very much, sir, I do like you. I'm just using it satirically here, this rah, I'm alive, I'm an American, I'm going to make good on the promise of a dynamic stock option driven denial. And as I press the gas pedal of my deception to the future of global annihilation, I'm going to make good on the promise of my adrenaline, my high flow, my psychedelicized spiritual ayahuasca, DMT awakens consciousness at the next conference of $10,000 an hour to attend somewhere on a sailboat off the coast of the Yucatan. Blah, blah, blah. You can just hear all our beautiful Greta Thunberg and all of her friends and everyone around us, around the world today, just basically saying blah, blah, blah. Isn't that what she's saying? She's basically saying everybody's losing someone. Essentially, all of us are creating a circumstance where all of us must lose each other. And then deeper than that, within the quantum field of physics and molecular biology and theoretical physics, what little I understand of it, inbuilt into the system of the God molecule times eternity, times infinity, is this thing called death. And I come right back to the Buddha's discourse of Kisa Gotami. Everybody, just pause there. Everybody is losing someone. And right there's a poignancy in me, and I really have seen it on the meditative approach, the psychedelic approach, the intimacy approach, the poetry approach. When I'm quiet and feeling and awake, I don't feel fear about discontinuity at all. I feel like I'm in some type of consecutively expanding, contracting, psychic identity formation, mind, body, deeper than the physical heart, deeper than the existential heart, a simultaneity of forms in this rebirthing of formations, and death doesn't even exist there. I don't want to be quick to fill in the gap with I know what is, but I walk on the beach down here at Baldwin as much as I feel moved, and I feel the sand, I feel the wind. My eyes are illuminated with colors and stars and clouds and birds and humans and animals, and my memory and my perception, and all of it is this photonic interplay of conditions arising in an infinite, seemingly infinite, centerless, expanding castle of conditions where nothing can be kept grabbing the air. Everybody is losing someone. But what are you losing? And the Buddha was skilled enough, as I interpret it with Kisa Gotami, to say, listen, it's natural to bond with that which is through your own womb, your son. We're all through the womb of the great feminine. We're all that intimate. The poignancy of being that bonded, and on a deeper existential, numismatic, psychophysical, molecular, total level, it doesn't exist. Phantasms dancing in a holographic unity in a strange, jagged puzzle cost existence. I don't want to get too far out there because it's so human. It bleeds, it cries, it weeps, it eats. It needs the external inside, the inside exside. The inside must go outside. And we're in this interchangeable, inseparable necessity of confluence and interrelatedness, where there is nothing but conditions arising on the beach of totality. And it feels like I'm going home. It feels like I'm living another day in the life forward. But as Einstein said, the past, the present, and the future, these stubborn illusions, time, the greatest hoax in the cosmos. No forward, no backwards, no up, no down. In an infinite paradigm, there's no center, there's no exterior, interior. And this great hoax of birth and aging and death seem to be human distortions. They could be cognitive distortions in other dimensions upon the cinemascope of perception in existence based upon light and sound and senses. It seems real, but when you become more sensitive, nobody's losing anyone. There's no one to lose. Conventionally speaking, yes, but I bailed out of the conventional 5 decades ago, plus some. I haven't extricated myself from being human, but I can say this, it's a radically compelling adventure to keep on keeping on, and do not in any way place my faith, safety, trust, allegiance in the form, in the aneurysm, in the food, in the shelter, all these temporary little abodes called stuff and things, necessities. But maybe it was Jesus that said it, do not place your faith, trust, confidence, loot, money, hope in that which does not exist in spirit form. Temporary travelers in a temporary dimension, doing extraordinary things to extricate ourselves from one dimension of engagement into another dimension that doesn't exclude a lesser, higher dimension, call it integral. But eventually, what are the binding forces that keep us in fear, in narrowness, in myopia? That healing, that expansion is super rad. And it's said that Kisa Gotama came to the Buddha and said, my friend, there is no home where I could not find someone who was not lost someone. Everybody is losing someone. Are we waiting for our turn? Although it looks as if we're staying healthy and doing yoga and being responsible and meditating in all the ways in which we anoint our day, our week, our month with the breathtaking display of our spiritual intelligence. But how easy it would be, and I've seen it in myself and others too who have the courage, that it's easy to be in an unaware obedience to cultural norms called being spiritually correct. Spiritually correct yogis, uber spiritually correct meditators, super uber spiritually correct nuns and monks in the Theravada Buddhist order, super uber spiritually correct evangelical Christian congregations and preachers living in the gospel of Christian correctness in the four walls of birth, aging, death. And really, am I really living? And what does that mean to me? What does it mean to me to, as repeatedly as I have the courage, to keep asking on a more and more intimate felt oxygenation level of being? I mean, self-intimacy. Deep, integral, liberating, felt realities. I mean, really a soul to soul. Your own psychotherapeutic, psychedelic, kind of symbolic ayahuasca, not to purge, but to access. That's the most beautiful thing about meditation and retreat, sacred retreat environments. And I'm very, very determined. I have a couple of close allies who are looking into the creation of a soon-to-be, I pray, weekend meditation sacred retreat. I want to commune with a few men and women in silence and in psychic intimacy and feel everybody is losing someone. Now what? November, December 2021. A tapestry of liberal counties and cities and townships and schools interspersed with intersecting government areas of overreach and authoritarianism and totalitarianism, Latvia and Austria and other places in the world that mimic each other's control needs, and within that there are liberal, more open-minded areas. And we're living in a very strange quilt today of the attempt at coercive control and misinformation. So everybody's losing someone. This is going to be so historic soon. I don't know what the other side of this wave is. But I do know that my Dharma life is deeply rooted to these 6 things. And I'm going to say them in sequence, say a few words about them all, and close. Essentially, why? What is moving me? Besides the quantum existential momentum of becoming that's just innate in the oxygen in the blood, in whatever the DNA and God molecule mix is that keeps, us standing, walking, moving, talking. The more aware touchstones of my own most honored qualities are 6. I wake to keep evolving nibbana, the unconditioned relationship to phenomenology inside and outside for the purpose of awakening to the truth of existence, nibbana, in near-term vicinity, in the moment, in the hour, as well as the highest aspiration for me, the absolute absence of corruption, cognitive corruption. I don't want to vilify consciousness with anger, greed, and delusion, but I do often unrecognized judgments of others, many people I don't know, dictators, totalitarian zealots, torturers, assassins, idiot politicians, sold out leaders, corruption. The corruption of putting personal profit and power and privilege over people, making people subjects to your dominator psychology. Removing those corruptions from the DNA and from consciousness and from the cosmos, nibbana. 2, the Buddhist Pali word, parami. SOM, states of mind. SOC, states of consciousness. States of excellence, as my late teacher, the Venerable Sayadaw U Pandita, explained to me before he passed away in 2016. Classically speaking, these 10 attributes, these 10 states of excellence, truthfulness, generosity, wisdom, moral integrity, patience, determination, concentration, loving kindness, equanimity, and how many more attributes connected to these colossal states of excellence. To wake, to evolve those paramis is a very deep spiritual raison d'etre, personally for me. Beyond the circumstances of happiness or joy or pain, developing attitudes that challenge my safety, my comfort, my need for happiness and peace, in doing all that I can to alchemize, transmute, and mindfully and intelligently transform different degrees of crises and complexity. How to transform anger into the victory of love. How to transform judgment into the beauty of unity. Those types of alchemy based upon the paramis. I've often said over the years, make your own list of attributes that you aspire as the raison d'etre of your presence over preferred outcomes, the outcome of the elevation of the paramis. Number 3, a personal original phrase that I feel is a deep root in my being is existential rebellion. And it's a recognition that the context of existence, inside and outside, is jagged, it's fraught with complexity, and quite likely deep embedded molecular DNA configurations that lead to domination, harm, violence. Just that we perceive violence inside to self, and if unrecognized through the filters of anger and greed and delusion, we project those states onto others and we denigrate others. That we recognize violence. Existential rebellion to me is the heart's dedication to challenge all forms of ignorance, delusion, greed, anger, fear, violence, inside and out, in all dimensions, so long as I have a recognition of identity. May that raison d'etre, the existential rebel in me, not cease, the bodhisattvic spirit, to vanquish that which is unbeneficial to me and unbeneficial and beautiful to others. That existential rebellion. Of course, creative expression is very intimately engaged within the existential rebel. I love music and art and dance and love and poetry and play. And there's a lot of zest, I feel, in my day when I feel rooted in creative expression. 4, removing suffering within consciousness. It's hard to avoid that in my own life because I just don't like to suffer and I don't like to see other people suffer. So the reason to live, to challenge complacency and postponement and privilege and profit and convenience and safety over the engagement of crises and complexity, the adventurer, the warrior in each of us, is to do my little part in freeing my vicinity of engagement on this earth and in this cosmos, trying to create a band of safety and protection where there is the freedom from suffering. 5 is purely mystical adventure. There is something beyond my despair, my idea of mortality, separation from those whom I love, the pandemic, my dislike of Anthony Fauci and Joseph Biden and Xi Jinping, the Maoist dictator on the planet today. I dislike at times my own sense of pride and arrogance. Mystical adventure, living and coexisting with complexity, but rising to the occasion, to set sail to foreign lands, territories, galaxies. I would love to be a disembodied astronaut where my consciousness can be decoupled with my organs and blood and my lungs and my body and live in this type of cognitive matrix and move at a light speed level, or even if something's faster than light, to explore and inhabit and engage and communicate with as many dimensions of life in other parallel universes or dimensions of existence, that level of mystical adventure. Yes, I want to know. I don't want to just look through the telescope. I don't want to just meditate. I want to develop the full range of supernormal powers and psychic powers. All the Buddhist texts are filled with these extraordinary stories and examples of cognitive liberating theater, the duplication of bodies, the creation of mind formations that exceed anything the imagination could even dream of without that skill. And then the miracle of overcoming greed, anger, and delusion permanently, the nibbanification of all of these. So mystical adventure. And the last, which is very human for me, I would call it in the most simple way, interactive intimacy. I've used terms over the years like eroticized Ubuntu. I would evolve that into Dhamma eroticized Ubuntu. This isn't just ordinary neurotic human intimacy where there's an equal amount of finesse and romanticism and chemistry until it's over and all of a sudden you and she or he and it and kind of fall flat on how did that happen. But I'm saying, like, well, how should I compare this? Many of you who meditate will know that there is a, how do you say it? Like, how do you escape Earth's gravity? You must, I think, according to Newtonian calculus, reach and exceed 25,000 miles an hour. And then we break free, I understand, from the gravitational forces intrinsic within the physics of Earth and space. And suddenly there is weightlessness. Weightlessness within interactive intimacy. I would call that wisdom-infused creative mudita. Panya-infused creative mudita. Panya is the Buddhist Pali word that speaks to the extremely rare quality of wisdom. Knowledge is easy, but wisdom, and what is wisdom? The infusion of perception and the emotional capacity to translate complexity according to the truth and the reality of the conditions of being. Seeing impermanence, seeing emptiness, seeing that grasping and attachment lead to fear and suffering. And the absence of fear, the absence of delusion, the absence of attachment, the openness of consciousness, the luminosity born from seeing impermanence, emptiness of self. If I hold on to this, I will suffer. Everybody is losing someone. Aha, I got it. Existential misinformation. And we release into this wisdom-infused, creative mudita. Mudita, a very rarely used word in Buddhist circles, is a creative wonderment with someone and a creative intelligence where your desire for their happiness exceeds your need to be heard or right or return to ordinary or return to another topic. Someone's talking to you and sharing with you something important to her that's juicy, that's insightful, that's delightful, and they're safe and familiar enough within the relationship with you to trust and feel the fidelity of the safety. That's the context. Mudita is, I'm going to co-create joy with you. So, wisdom-infused, creative, sympathetic joy. Call it Dhamma or awakened, infused, eroticized Ubuntu. Ubuntu, the Pali Buddhist, Sanskrit, South African concept. I cannot be who I am without you. intersubjective intimacy with a wise filter of elevating joy. We know that within intimate partnerships. We've seen that type of sapio, spiritualized, sexual, transsexual, eroticized, cognitive, tantrified, intimate wisdom play. That is pretty rad. It's super rare to find, even in monasteries where there's a commitment to sacred celibacy, but you do meet nuns and monks, I have, who speak, and I'm not just using speak through auditory vibration and the skillful use of language, but many of you who are psychically inclined, telepathically inclined, clairvoyantly inclined, know that we speak through different portals of perception that aren't necessarily as demonstrative as our eyes, our ears, our nose, our body, and our tongue. We have more subtle portals of perception, more esoteric, existential senses called the psychic intuitive. And here, that level of play, that level of curiosity, the mudita with friends. I mean, you just want to permanently marry them, but the deeper Dhamma of it is to marry the conditions for the space, to keep re-arising and treasure that you have that with her, that you have that with him, and to understand the conditions for that level of mystical, nibbanified, parami, awakened, existentially rebellious, creatively expressed, a dedication to removing your own constituents of conflict and gravity, and playing in that interactive intimacy of Dhamma-infused creative mudita, Dhamma-awakened, eroticized Ubuntu. Those who can play in that type of, it's another way of looking at the Bodhisattva spirit in a more, for me, a more elegant, pointing to the constituents, taking it out of the theology of Buddhism. And what is that poetry, that chemistry, and can it be developed and evolved? And this is where over the years, the last 5 years especially, I've taken such an interest in the more esoteric, rare elements of the traditional Buddhist canon and my teachers' books that have been translated into English about some of these more esoteric elements of traditional Theravadan Buddhism. One that I keep referring to is, I think it's the story of Kema, the Tuvataka Sutta. It's really pointing to the use of psychically awakened access to shared space and the playful, mystical poetry, deliberate use of auditory vibration, the symphony of symmetry, for the purpose of illuminating the unknown, unseen in one's own consciousness, and in the consciousness of other, at least according to the teachings attributed to the Buddha. How to awaken potentials in each other. Mudita is playing in the joy on the terms of another person's joy, and creatively expanding that joy so that they don't feel that they need to be in a hurry to move through it to go back to a topic, whatever that topic may be. How to prolong mystical events, cognitively insightful wisdom events. I think one of the most enduring qualities of meditation, which is really just the deliberate development of mindfulness, right effort, right concentration, that focuses on the phenomena in the present again and again and again, so that we develop a type of escape velocity from the kilesa, the gravitational force, the identities, the configurations of conditioning. And all of a sudden, an individual, those of you who've meditated, know that all of a sudden you're in now, oh my God, the identity of the individual that entered the retreat can't be found. And I'm in this radiance of focused, awakened, concentrated, reality kissing, if you will. I'm seeing reality as it really is, and there's a high degree of joy, if not rapture at times, in seeing the phenomenology of present time objects arising with awareness and passing. And you go, oh my God, the insights that are just kind of flowering like an infinite field of orchids or roses or tulips or whatever. You go, oh my God, consciousness can be evolved. I can escape the gravitational forces of fear, of shame, of greed. I don't need to work with them. I've overcome that topography. That's the whole purpose of intensive, focused meditation, at least as I understand it. And there, playing with another in the gravitational freedom of psychically awakened, wisdom-infused mudita. Your happiness is my happiness. And what we do there at that happiness edge to create new formations of intimacy, of joy, of safety, giving our lives and giving each other a reason to believe through the direct experience of beauty. So those are the 6 things that, the 6 dimensions of why I'm living. Nibbana, parami, existential rebellion, creative expression, the challenge to suffering inside of consciousness, mystical adventure, and the interactive intimacy of a wisdom-infused creative mudita, a Dhamma awakened, eroticized Ubuntu. I cannot be who I am without you. And erotic here is not just a sexual eroticism, it's the interplay of psychological, existential, emotional, transcendental, creative, playful engagement of shared space. And eventually, can we create timelessness together? Can we dance in a shared nirvana? Can we truly overcome the epidermis of separation on the most intimate levels of God? Can we escape the velocity and the gravitational force of a universe as we understand it through all forms of physics, programmed to die? Everybody is losing someone. You and me, everybody. The Buddha said the oceans are filled with our tears because we've lost so many people near and dear. Kisa Gotami. It said that she understood that everybody's losing someone. Renounced the conditionings of the world, and it said that she, soon after this rare exchange of Dhamma eroticized Ubuntu with the Buddha, she attained Arahant, Nibbana, the absolute absence of fear, of ignorance, of separation. The timelessness of a condition beyond conditions. Whatever we are, wherever we are, whatever this is, if I forget, please remind me of my list. If you forget, may you write them on the walls of your soul. May you tell your best friends and allies in your next level of creative Dhamma awakened mudita. Share the joys of your Dhamma. And may we together in solidarity keep the luminosity of this timeless Dhamma alive. We're all Kisa Gautamis. We're all Buddhas. We all have those seeds. And may we keep planting seeds in this strange ambient totality called eternity and the galaxies and the universe. May we keep planting cosmic seeds of hope, of freedom, of adventure, of trust, of the intelligences to keep on keeping on and freeing ourselves from the gravitational forces that hold us back. So from my heart to yours, have a beautiful day. God willing, see you tomorrow here at 9:30 from Maui. Thank you.